Copyright disclaimer: under the Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comments, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing.
You sound like you got an attitude.
Cause I do. I've been working 14 hours. You sitting here dressed like the fucking Tooth Fairy and ain't cooked shit. You won't be going to no Halloween party if it ain't no food in here. Come on now. Corona, we got stuff like that.
Make it?
I just got off for 14 hours of work. Woman, what the hell are you talking about? Well, I can't make it.
Okay, you think I wasn't working today?
Doing what? Trying on fucking outfits that I bought? Yo, don't piss me off, Jasmine. Allison.
Who the fuck is Jasmine?
The bitch that cook. Yeah, I'm cheating. The bitch that cook. That's why I wasn't here yesterday, and that's why I wasn't here the day before. Because when I go to Jasmine house, we got steaks, we got stuffed chicken, yams, everything fresh off of work. When I come here, you asking about Lucky Charms. We ain't got no fucking milk.
So why you ain't go to Jasmine house today then? Why you came here today?
Because I've been paying the bills.
Why you buying me Halloween costumes if you cheating? Go to Jasmine.
Because I thought maybe if I dressed you up like a different bitch, you'd act like one.
All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachak Wadash. Double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone, who rule very well, very beautifully. Double salutations unto the Akim and her pushing its gospel in truth and in sincerity to the best of their ability, given to them by Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect scattered abroad. May the election of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord willing, fall upon all your houses. This is the brother Quanawat for coming back at you, Lord will, with the edifying lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord will. It is edifying, Lord will. It is straight to the point. And I had come across that video, man, of that, and it was, and it was ultimately a skit, right? It wasn't necessarily real. That was, two people that were on a podcast, and they were kind of just, I guess you could say, role playing, if you will. But nonetheless, that's ultimately the sentiment, right, and the mindset of a lot of these women out here, man, right? Which is why, the elder apostles, we're starting with our elder apostles of Great Millstone on down. Hey, bro say leave the so-called black woman alone, man. Right? And really, it's not just the so-called black woman, but it's mainly the so-called black woman, right? That's a mindset you see within a lot of Israelite women, right? But again, mainly the so-called black woman, man, that they ultimately feel like there's some kind of prize or there's some kind of, gift, right, that a man is ultimately supposed to be, bowing down to and supposed to be, serving, right? But hey, that's not how it's supposed to be. Right, a woman was ultimately created for the man, right? We read that. Matter of fact, we'll come back to this, but this is 1 Corinthians, the 11th chapter, in verse 9. Right, I'll start at verse 8. It says, "For the man is not of the woman," right? Because, going back and right into Genesis, right? The Lord had created, right, that woman from Adam, right? Created Eve from Adam. Right, not vice versa, right? So it says, for the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man, right? It says, neither was a man created for the woman, but the woman for the man. So women, right, were ultimately created for man, to serve man, right? Because scriptures say that a woman is supposed to be subject unto her husband, It's like, yeah. Right? Ephesians 5 and verse 24, right? This is all heavy, right? It says, therefore, as the church is subject unto Hamashiach, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything, right? So you women are supposed to be at home cooking, right? You women are supposed to be at home taking care of the kids. You women are supposed to be serving your man. So if he does do a 12, 14, 16-hour shift, hey, well, guess what? You're supposed to be right there serving that man. That's how it's supposed to be, and that's how it's going to be in the kingdom, right? That the woman is going to be serving the man, right? All this new age feminist, the woman is on top, All that shit's finna be eradicated, man. That's that, that Edomite, relationship, if you will, right? The woman rules over the man, so on and so forth, which it's prophesied, right? It was prophesied, that a woman shall compass a man, and we're seeing that, but see, again, right? That's not within righteousness, man. That's not according to the order of Yahweh Bashim El Shai, right? 1 Corinthians 14:40 said, let all things be done decently and in order. And a woman being over a man is completely out of order, right? We read, and again, in that same chapter, 1 Corinthians 11, and also at verse 1, it says, be ye followers of me, even I also am of Hamashiach. And this is Apostle Paul, right? He's ultimately giving you that ordinance, right, that comes ultimately from the heavens, man, right? This is the order, right, that was created, right, in the heavens before all things were created, right? It says, now I praise you, brethren, that ye remember me in all things and keep the ordinances as I delivered them to you, right? But I would have you know that the head of every man is Hamashiach, right? And the head of the woman is the man, right? The head of the woman, right? The one who is ultimately a ruler over the woman, right, is the man. This is that order, right? As it says right here, it says, and the head of Hamashiach is the Most High. So it goes the Most High Yahweh, right? Then it goes his son, right? His only beloved begotten son, right? Who the world inwardly calls Jesus Christ, true name being Yahweh Shai. So it goes Yahweh, Yahweh Shai, and then man, and then woman, right? And as we read in the scriptures, right? I think it's Sirach, the 3rd chapter, right? That the Lord gave, the woman, right, authority over the son. So it goes Yahweh, Yahweh Shai, man, woman, children, in that order, right? But again, in this world, right, you got women, right, that are over men, That's completely out of fucking order. Well, as it says in Job 20 and Job 10-20, right? This is a land without order, right? A land of darkness, man. So this place is completely out of order. And see, that's what's pushed, right? And that's why you see, the so-called black women, really a majority of Israelite women, if not all Israelite women, but again, mainly the so-called black women being in that mindset of they're some kind of prize. I remember watching a video a while back that, this so-called black woman, I can't remember her name, she sat there and said that men are supposed to kiss the ground that she walks on. That she's the prize and that men are supposed to bow down to her. And she actually said that shit in the video, man, and was dead ass serious about that, right? Hey, well, may Yahweh Bashim El Shai ultimately kill that bitch, man, but nonetheless, and excuse my language, any woman that's acting like that is exactly that, but nonetheless, man, that's not how it's supposed to be, man. So you brothers, man, stay away from these so-called black women, as the elder apostles on down, right, ultimately teach, right? Stay away from these women, man. You're not supposed to just lay down with any woman anyways, man. Which, brings me back, to that precept I had pulled up in the first place. It's Sirach, I think it's 26, if I'm not mistaken. Right here, right? This is Sirach 26 and verse 19. It says, my son, keep the flower of thine age sound and give not thy strength to strangers, man. So you can't just lay down with any woman and, ultimately pop any woman, Now you got kids by some demonic ass fucking female, which we know that most of these women out here have they've hopped from rod to rod to rod. If a woman has slept with more than one man in her entire life, she is considered a harlot, right? She's considered a 304, Now you do have, some sisters that ultimately come into this truth, man, that might have had that type of lifestyle or, this, that, and the third, and that ultimately repented, may Yahweh Bashim El Shai, continue to have mercy upon you, you women, but we understand that that's an extremely small number. Extremely small number, man. Most of these women out here, man, they on that, 304 season, man. They with that shit, man. And this is why, again, most of these women are gonna die. A lot of the death that's gonna take place in the time of Jacob's trouble, right? The peak when Jacob's trouble ultimately, starts to get worse, right? Because remember, we're in it right now, right? We're at the beginning stages, of Jacob's trouble. But as it continues to get worse, you're gonna see a lot of judgment going out on these women because of their wickedness, man, because of that harlotry, you know, and that whoredom, you know. So you're not supposed to be, again, just laying down with any woman, you know. It says, verse 20, it says, when thou hast gotten a fruitful possession through all the field, meaning you find one good one, which that's few. You're almost never going to find, you know, a good woman here in Babylon, right? This is why Apostle Paul made the statement, you know, that it would be better, right, if we remain as him, right, not having a wife, right, not ultimately dealing with women, you know, like that, man. You know, of course, you know, if you're burning, you know, you ain't had none in a while, man, go get you, you know, a little something, do your thing, man, and you know, cast it to the rocks, you know, just calling Spider-Man, you know, but do your thing, cast it to the rocks, man. You know, you don't need to be, you know, having these, especially these women, man, when you know, and it's been proven that when a woman ultimately lays down with a man, you know, that man ultimately releases, you know, into that woman, you know, his DNA sticks to her brain cell or her brainstem, man, you know, and that woman will ultimately, you know, this is why scriptures talk about, right, that a woman and a man shall be joined together, they shall become one flesh, because she'll start to ultimately take on, right, some of his characteristics, right, and be formed, right, the longer that she's with this man, and, you know, ultimately start to, you know, to be terraformed, right, to him, you know, through that union, man. So that'll ultimately take place. So then you got a woman that's ultimately been, you know, released into by multiple different men, right? She's got multiple different characteristics, multiple different, you know, DNAs within her. Now she's, you know, acting all crazy, this and the third. That's why you get these women like that, man, you know? So you're not just supposed to lay down with any old fucking woman, man, you know? And again, you're not going to find, right, a good woman, you know, in this society, right? They've all been, you know, ultimately, you know, harlots at one point or another, man. You know, so if you ain't got a woman, you know, be single, man. That's why the elder apostles are pushing that so hard, right? It says, when thou hast gotten a fruitful possession through all the field, sow with thine own seed, trusting in the goodness of thy stock. So if you do find, you know, a good woman, a decent woman, you know, and you know, hey, well, guess what, man? You know, first and foremost, right, examine that woman. You know what I mean? Obviously, we understand, you know, that, you know, King Solomon, right, he said out of 1,000 women, he found none. So these women aren't going to be dwelling with wisdom. But if she ain't no, you know, if she more of a homebody, you know, she cooks, she clean, this and the third, hey, that's a decent enough, you know, then at that point, you know, but other than that, again, for the most part, right, stay away from these damn women, man, right? Verse 21, it says, so thy race which thou leavest shall be magnified, having the confidence of their good descent. And harlots shall be counted as spittle. So most of these women ain't shit, man. You know, 99.999% of these women ain't shit, man. You know, it says, but a married woman is a tower against death to her husband. It says a wicked woman is given as a portion to a wicked man, right? But a godly woman is given to him that feareth the Lord. That's right, man. You know, so ultimately, first and foremost, right, if the Lord ultimately deems it, right, for you to have a woman, he'll give you, you know, a woman that isn't going to be as bad as these average women out here, man. You know, but we understand that majority bros, you know, you're either going to deal with a wicked woman, man, or you're going to be single, you know, and that's just you know, the state in which our nation is in currently, right? Being bugged out, being out of order, right? And that's all because of who's in charge, right? Who, you know, and I've said it time and time again, you know, first and foremost, you know, with the elder apostles, but time and time again, right? That all of this is because of who's in charge, right? Sirach, the 10th chapter, right? As the judge is, right, so is his officers and those that dwell in them, roughly paraphrasing, right? So, of course, wickedness is being, you know, exalted and perpetrated in the earth, man, right? Which is why you see, you know, a woman ultimately, you know, acting as if she can be over a man, this and the third. But that's not true. That's not according to the scriptures, man. You know? These women out here, man, they're evil as shit, right? Sirach 26 or 25 and verse 19 says, all wickedness is but little to the wickedness of a woman, right? These women out here are fucking evil as shit, man. Hopping from rod to rod to rod, wanting to show off their bodies and this and the third. And, oh, if my man don't want me to, you know, to wear those clothes, I don't care what he gonna say, I'll leave him, this and this. Like, what the hell? Like, fuck out of here, man. You know, that's why you women ain't worth a damn. You talk about you the prize, man. You women evil as shit, man. You know? But it says, let the portion of a sinner fall upon her. And all you women that are ultimately, that are out here, you know, being wicked as hell, hey, the Lord's finna destroy you women, man. You know? Lord finna get rid of you women. It says, as the climbing up a sandy way is to the feet of the aged, so is a wife full of words to a quiet man. Right? It says, stumble not at the beauty of a woman and desire her not for pleasure. So, I mean, again, right? Which goes back to, you know, the Sirach 26 as we were reading. You know, you can't just lay down with any old woman, man. And again, you can't, you know, you can look at a woman, right, because she's pretty, you know, this and the third, man. But you shouldn't desire her because she's pretty or because she got, you know, good features on her body and whatnot, man. You know, again, right? You can't just lay down with any old woman, man. There was a video I had seen, you know, about this so-called white lady, man. She body nice, you know, but she's over here breaking 75-inch TVs, throwing brand new J's, this and that. You know, she don't give a fuck what she doing, you know, because she didn't get her way. She want to act crazy, man. You know, which is the reason why you can't just, hey, man, it's better, you know, if you're single, just stay single. You know, don't be dealing with the woman, you know, like that, man. If you're single, stay single, right? And I'll read that. Right, it's Apostle Paul, and I'm just flowing through the Spirit, man. I had seen this video, you know, just ultimately, you know, Spirit was, bringing to my remembrance a few precepts, man. You know, but this is 1 Corinthians 7, and it's right here. This is 1 Corinthians 7 and verse 28. It says, but, and if thou marry, thou hast not sinned, right? If you ultimately get a wife, you know what I mean? You ain't sinning, you know? It says, and if a virgin marry, she hath not sinned. Nevertheless, such shall have trouble in the flesh, right? Because you're going to have issues, man. You know? You're going to have issues no matter what, right? Especially in this world, you know? In the flesh and whatnot, right? Bodies that are subject unto sin. Right, you're gonna have this. You're gonna have arguments. You're gonna have fights. This and the third. All this shit, man. You know, disputes, whatever you want to call them. You know, you're gonna have that shit, man. You know, so if you ultimately don't have a woman, hey, man, just avoid that situation because you're gonna deal with some shit, man. Especially with these worldly ass women, man. You know, prepare to be, you know, backstabbed and, you know, cheated on and all this shit, man. Right? You know, you don't want to have to deal with that, right? It says, but I spare you. It says, but this I say, brethren, the time is short, right? It remaineth that both they that have wives be as though they had none, right? So even if you do got a wife, man, hey, we're supposed to be first and foremost, you know, serving Yahweh Shem Shai. That comes first. You know, comes first and foremost, man. Right? Our families ultimately come second to Yahweh Shem Shai. Right, so there's gonna be times where you're just gonna have to, hey, you know, put them on the back burner. You know, if you do got a family, man. You know, there's a precept. Let me see, bro. It's like passing, like my eyes are probably passing it. Salakia, let me find it. Come right here, verse 7. Salakia, it took me a minute. It says Apostle Paul, right? 1 Corinthians 7 and 7. It says, for I would that all men were even as myself. But every man that hath this proper gift of the Most High, one after this manner and another after that, right? So, hey, ultimately, he, you know, hey, Apostle Paul didn't deal with women like that, man. You know, he didn't deal with no woman, you know. So he's saying, hey, it'd be better if you just be like me, right? Not have women, don't deal with women, man. You know. But hey, if you do have a wife or whatnot, Hey, understand that you're going to have, problems in the flesh, right? But nonetheless, right? Hey, the Lord ultimately, pray to the Lord Yahweh Shem Shai, and, we'll ultimately be able to deal with those situations, right, through the Spirit, man, right? The Lord will give us strength. But if you're not, you ain't got a wife, man, hey, stay away from these women, man, because you see how they acting, man. You see what they're about in this world. Really fuck these women, man. Man, fuck these women. You women, man, y'all want to continue to act like that and go down that path. Hey, the Lord finna get you, right? The Lord finna get you. You're not going to escape. You're not going to escape judgment from Yahweh Shem El Shai, as it says right there, right? As we read in Sirach, the 25th chapter, right? All wickedness is but little to the wickedness of a woman. Let the portion of a sinner fall upon her, right? And we understand that the wages of sin is death, right? And that's what's going to come to you, wicked women, man. Let's go ahead and grab this and we'll close out. I don't want to make this too long. This is Isaiah 32 and verse 9. It says, rise up, ye women that are at ease, right? And these women think they good, right? They chilling, right? But the Lord's finna come for y'all, right? It says, rise up, ye women that are at ease. Hear my voice, ye careless daughters. Give ear unto my speech. It says, many days and years shall ye be troubled, ye careless women, for the vintage shall fail and the gathering shall not come. And we understand that, there's a famine that's coming, right? Prices are going up, right? The value of the dollar is going down, which is creating that, that inflation, right? We understand truckers are being taken off the roads, right? We understand that, businesses are going down. People are losing their jobs, so, hey, shit about to hit the fan, right? What are you women going to do? Nothing really. If the Lord ultimately is dealing with you and you repent, hey, well, the Lord will guide you to a man of the Lord. But if not, you want to be wicked, and move right as you've been moving, and the Lord's gonna, ultimately give you over to, that destruction, right, to death, right? Tremble, you women that are ease, be troubled, you careless ones, strip you and make you bare, and gird sackcloth upon your loins. So you women better repent. Brothers that ain't got no women, hey, don't be dealing with these damn women. Brothers that are dealing with the woman, right? And she ultimately being wicked as hell, evil as shit, Scriptures say if she go and not as thou wilt, right? Give her a bill of divorcement, man. She being wicked as hell. She cheating. Get rid of that bitch, man. She committing adultery, right? Fornication, all this other shit. Hey, get rid of that bitch, man. Right? Let the Lord deal with her, right? I'm not telling any brother, man, to just go and leave their woman, just because I'm, some small shit. A woman, according to the Scriptures, man, right? That you can't leave a woman unless she commit, fornication or adultery, If she acting like that, man, hey, dip on that bitch, man. Get rid of her, Hey, because the Lord finna judge her ass, man, But that's all I got, man. Just flowing through the Spirit, man. Lord wills that I find Lord will straight to the point. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shai, by Hashem, Kodash, that belongs to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of the great millstone. To the extent I say shalom.